Oh, how we will miss this man. That's how she began. Not with a press conference. Not through a spokesperson. Not even with a carefully rehearsed interview. Meg Ryan, America's rom-com queen, the golden-haired icon of the silver screen, broke her silence with just a single photo and a caption that stopped millions mid-scroll. A photo of her and Rob Reiner, dancing, smiling, innocent, frozen in time. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what if that post wasn't just a tribute? What if it was a warning? Because Rob Reiner wasn't just her director. He was family, a mentor, a safe place in an industry full of wolves. And now, he was dead, stabbed to death in his own home, alongside his wife Michelle Singer Reiner. And their son, Nick, was the one being walked out in handcuffs as helicopters circled over the $13.5 million Brentwood estate, and the LAPD sealed off the scene. So here's the question no one in Hollywood wants to ask. Why did Meg Ryan wait so long to speak? And what made her speak now? Let's be honest. This isn't your average celebrity death. This isn't a sad goodbye after a long illness or a quiet moment in hospice. This is the kind of story that crashes headlines across the globe. This is the kind of story where everyone has something to say, except the people who knew the truth, until Meg stepped in. And what she wrote, it wasn't just heartbreaking. It was coded, symbolic, full of contradictions. And when you read between the lines, it doesn't just raise questions, it explodes them. So buckle in, because this isn't just a story about Meg Ryan mourning a friend. It's about what happened the night Rob Reiner was murdered, what his son might have been hiding, and what secrets Meg might be carrying, whether she realizes it or not. Because in Hollywood, silence is never just silence. Chapter 0, The Night It Happened. Let's rewind. December 15th, 2025. Brentwood, California. The air was cold, quiet, peaceful. The kind of night you'd imagine movie legends spending in pajamas, sipping tea, watching old black and white films in bed. That's how it should have been. Instead, police were called to a multi-million-dollar estate, where what they found inside looked like something from a horror film. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, stabbed to death. Multiple wounds. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. And then, Nick, their son, 32 years old, living in the guest house. He was arrested on the spot. But here's what's strange. There were no signs he'd run. No evidence of blood on his clothes. No confession. Just silence. Dazed silence. And one cryptic phrase, heard only by one detective. I told them this would happen. We'll get into that later. Meg Ryan, the missing voice. In the days that followed, Hollywood lit up with headlines. News anchors scrambled. Social media exploded. Friends like Billy Crystal gave statements. Studios issued condolences. Directors, actors, even politicians commented. But Meg said nothing. She wasn't just a former co-star. She was the face of one of Rob Reiner's most iconic films. When Harry Met Sally wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural moment. It launched Meg into the stratosphere. It defined rom-coms. And Rob was the man behind the camera, shaping every frame, coaching every smile, pushing every tear. Their relationship wasn't just professional. It was personal, deep. And yet, for 5 days after Rob and Michelle's murder, Meg said nothing. Was it grief? Or was it something else? Because in Hollywood, silence is rarely unintentional. When the most beloved names in the industry go quiet during a media firestorm, it usually means one thing. They're being told to stay quiet. The Instagram post that changed everything. Then, December 17th, she posted a simple black and white photo. She and Rob, dancing, and just a few lines. Thank you, Rob and Michelle, for the way you believe in true love, in fairy tales, and in laughter. Fairy tales? Laughter? In the face of a double murder? It was moving. It was poetic. But it was also unsettling. Because buried within that message was something more haunting. I have to believe their story will not end with this impossible tragedy, that some good may come. Some good from this? And then, the line that raised the biggest red flag. They would want that to be hopeful and humane, to be something that brings us all to a greater understanding. That's not grief. That's philosophy. That's coded, as if she's trying to steer the story, direct the narrative. Or worse, bury something. Because while the world wants to believe this was a tragic incident caused by a troubled son, some people who knew Rob, Michelle, and Nick, aren't so sure. A perfect Hollywood family. Or was it? On the outside, the Reiners were everything Hollywood wanted to believe in. Rob, the legendary director, beloved by liberals and progressives, a champion of justice, a master of storytelling. Michelle, his partner in life, his quiet rock, a woman who never sought the spotlight but shaped countless lives behind the scenes. Nick, the prodigal son, raised among fame, fortune, and film sets. But what if behind those gates, things weren't so perfect? What if Nick's demons weren't just personal, but generational? What if Rob, for all his talent, was a father who couldn't reach his son? And what if Michelle, quiet, kind, supportive Michelle, was keeping a secret of her own? There's a reason Meg Ryan's post didn't focus on how they died. It focused on what they believed in, almost as if she was trying to remind the world they weren't monsters. They were dreamers. And maybe, just maybe, they were victims of something bigger than we know. The Last Dance. There's something haunting about that photo Meg shared. Not a red carpet moment, not a still from a movie, but a candid snapshot. Meg and Rob, laughing, dancing, two icons lost in a moment. It doesn't scream Hollywood. It screams friendship, intimacy, trust. So the question lingers. What did Meg know? What had she seen behind the curtain of that picture-perfect family? And most importantly, what did Rob Reiner tell her before he died? Because sources say Rob was feeling troubled weeks before the attack, that he'd cut ties with someone close, that he'd begun writing something only a few people knew about. And if Meg was one of them, that changes everything. The real reason she posted. Here's where things take a sharp turn. According to two sources close to Meg, one of them a former publicist, another a studio executive, Meg didn't plan to post anything at all. She was urged to, pressured, allegedly told it would look bad if she stayed silent. But more than that, one insider claims she received a call from someone on the inside who told her, "This is bigger than you know. Keep it kind. Keep it clean. Don't stir the pot." Is that why the post felt sanitized? Is that why she didn't mention Nick? Did she want to say more, but couldn't? We may never know, but we will dig deeper. Because this story isn't over. And the next part will blow this entire thing wide open. Because what Meg Ryan didn't say in her post might be more important than what she did. And someone close to Rob, is finally ready to break their silence. But what Meg Ryan didn't say in her post might be more important than what she did. And someone close to Rob, is finally ready to break their silence. Who is this someone? Sources point to a name most wouldn't expect. Not another actor. Not a director. Not even a Reiner. It was a producer, someone who worked on When Harry Met Sally, who had stayed in Rob's inner circle for years. Quiet, consistent, loyal. Let's call him Peter. For now, Peter contacted an entertainment journalist 3 days after Meg's post. Not with gossip, not with scandal, but with a warning. "Watch Meg's words carefully," he reportedly said. "She's not just grieving. She's protecting something." Protecting what exactly? And from whom? The alleged diary. Here's where things start to feel like a movie script. If the movie was written by a screenwriter who'd been through hell and back. There are rumors that Rob Reiner kept a handwritten journal. Not for scripts. Not for stories. For thoughts. Personal ones. Dark ones. Peter claims he saw this journal during a visit in October. It was on Rob's desk, underneath a stack of legal papers. He said Rob chuckled nervously when Peter asked about it. "That's just for me," Rob allegedly said. "One day, someone will read it. Maybe Meg." Wait, what? Why would Rob name Meg Ryan as the person to eventually read his private thoughts? Unless he trusted her with something more than friendship. Unless she already knew what was inside. And if that journal is missing from the crime scene inventory, as some now suspect, it begs the question, did someone take it? Did Nick know about it? Did Meg? Meg and Rob. More than just director and actress? We don't want to speculate irresponsibly, but we do want to follow the patterns. Rob Reiner and Meg Ryan weren't just director and actress. They were bonded. Deeply. Multiple insiders described them as having a telepathic connection on set. They finished each other's sentences. She knew what he wanted before he even called action. They'd meet for dinners long after filming wrapped. Not in flashy West Hollywood hotspots, but in quiet, off-the-radar restaurants where no paparazzi lurked. One source says they were often seen walking side by side at the beach, talking for hours. Another described a mysterious weekend retreat the two took back in the mid-2000s. Strictly platonic, they insisted, but curious nonetheless. And then there's this. In a 2008 interview, Meg Ryan was asked who she would trust with her deepest secrets. Her answer? Rob. Always Rob. So again we ask, what did she know? The fairy tale line, a hidden message? Let's go back to that Instagram caption. Thank you, Rob and Michelle, for the way you believe in true love, in fairy tales, and in laughter. Fairy tales? Why that word? Some believe it was just poetic language. Others, like Peter, believe it was a code. You see, Rob and Meg reportedly had a nickname for their private talks, fairy tale sessions. In moments when life felt heavy. When Hollywood got too cold, they'd sit down, close the door, and say, let's go into the fairy tale. It was their escape. But what if that phrase became something else? What if it became a warning? A shared code for this world is darker than we imagined. Michelle's silence, the missing voice in the narrative. Let's not forget Meg Ryan. In this media firestorm, most headlines scream about Rob and Nick. But Michelle? She's often just a footnote. And that's a problem. Because Michelle wasn't just a wife. She was a powerhouse. Quiet, yes. Private, yes. But she was involved. In charities. In mental health organizations. In Nick's recovery journey. She fought behind the scenes to keep the family together. And, according to one close friend, she was starting to pull away. From what, though? From Rob? From Nick? Or from something none of us fully understand? What we do know is that she had begun writing emails to friends, expressing exhaustion. One email, leaked anonymously, ended with this. Some days I wonder how the fairy tale ever became this dark. There's that phrase again. Fairy tale. A scene that might have been a goodbye. Here's something deeply unsettling. For days before the murders, Rob Reiner was spotted at a small outdoor cafe. Not in Brentwood. Not in Beverly Hills. But in Malibu. Alone. Witnesses say he looked gaunt. Distracted. He had a leather notebook on the table. He kept looking at his phone, then at the notebook, then back at the ocean. He was there for over 2 hours. Why? Was he writing something? Waiting for someone? Saying goodbye? Nobody knows. But we do know that 3 days later, he was dead. The phone call Meg received. Here's where everything tightens. Meg Ryan reportedly received a phone call at 2:13 a.m. on the night of the murder. Not from Rob. Not from Michelle. But from a number connected to Rob's estate. Her phone rang twice. She didn't answer. The number was disconnected by morning. Coincidence? Maybe. But Meg allegedly mentioned this to a close friend the next day, saying, it was like he was trying to reach out one last time. Why hasn't this been public? Why hasn't she spoken about it? Because maybe she's still terrified. A Hollywood underbelly. Things we weren't meant to see. What if this isn't just about a family tragedy? What if this is about something much bigger? Because Rob Reiner had enemies. He was outspoken, political, polarizing. He ruffled feathers. He challenged institutions. He was working, allegedly, on a private documentary about mental health and its link to Hollywood power structures. A project that would have exposed failures in rehab systems, legal protections, and even certain elite names who hid their broken children behind public smiles. Is that connected to what happened? Was Nick a broken child in a broken system? Or was Rob about to say something? The system didn't want out? And if Meg Ryan knew what that project contained, is she now carrying its burden? Why this story isn't over? We've seen stories like this before. Whispers of suicide, mental illness, family trauma. They get buried under red carpets and studio contracts. But this one feels different. Because the silence is cracking. And Meg's voice was the first crack in the wall. That photo? It wasn't just a throwback. It was a signal. And the caption? It was a breadcrumb trail. So here's where we leave you, for now. Because just 12 hours after Meg Ryan's post, someone tried to break into Rob Reiner's guest house. And what they were looking for might just be the missing piece of everything. They didn't come through the front gate. They didn't use the driveway. They crept through the dense hedges behind the Reiner estate, silent, deliberate, and determined. At exactly 3:42 a.m., just 12 hours after Meg Ryan's Instagram tribute sent shockwaves across the internet, a shadowy figure was caught on a neighbor's Ring camera attempting to breach the back perimeter of Rob Reiner's Brentwood mansion. But this wasn't just a break-in. It was a hunt. And what they were looking for wasn't money, wasn't jewelry, wasn't art. It was information. Specifically, what might still be hidden inside the guest house where Nick Reiner had lived, and where investigators say he spent the last night before his parents' murders alone. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To understand why someone would risk breaking into the most high-profile crime scene in Los Angeles, we have to go back to the night it all happened. December 15th, 2025, 10:37 p.m. Brentwood, California. Dispatch received a 911 call from an unknown male, breathless, panicked, and disoriented. The words were barely coherent. "There's blood. So much blood. They're not breathing. My dad. Please, he's not." Then silence. The line went dead. When LAPD arrived on the scene just 7 minutes later, they were met with chaos cloaked in stillness. The gates were open. The lights were on. There were no signs of forced entry. Inside the main house, on the floor of the master bedroom, lay Rob Reiner. Sprawled face up, lifeless. His white t-shirt soaked in red. Michelle Singer Reiner was found just down the hall, curled in a defensive position near the bathroom. Her wrists bore bruises. Both were stabbed multiple times. And in the detached guest house, their son, Nick, sat on the couch, shirtless, blank-eyed, covered in what appeared to be dried sweat, and something else. He said nothing, didn't run, didn't flinch. He simply whispered, "I told them this would happen." The crime scene that broke the internet. Within hours, the Reiner mansion was flooded with investigators, reporters, and helicopters. The moment the public learned it was Rob Reiner, the legendary director, the man behind The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, Stand By Me, and of course, When Harry Met Sally, the tragedy became a media firestorm. The death of a cinematic giant was tragic enough. But a double murder? Allegedly at the hands of his own son? That's not Hollywood. That's Greek tragedy. And the moment the photos of the police tape hit TMZ, the internet erupted. Actors, directors, politicians, fans, everyone had a theory. But what most people didn't see, what was never shown on camera, was what the detectives found smeared across the wall of Rob's office. 3 words, written in blood. "This is justice." No one knows who wrote it. Nick refused to speak beyond his initial sentence. His lawyer later claimed he was medicated and not lucid. But the detectives believed one thing. Whoever did this wasn't acting in blind rage. They were sending a message. Nick Reiner, the Hollywood kid who fell too hard. To the outside world, Nick Reiner seemed like another privileged son of a powerful man, raised among industry legends. Private school education, cameos in movies, parties with child stars and future Oscar winners. But behind the scenes, Nick was falling apart. He battled addiction in his teens, was in and out of rehab by his early 20s. At 25, he had a highly publicized mental health episode that resulted in a 72-hour psychiatric hold after an incident at a Malibu resort. Friends say he resented Rob. Others say he idolized him and felt abandoned. And Michelle? She was caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace, holding everything together with grace and Band-Aids. When the pandemic hit, Nick moved back into the guest house. It was supposed to be temporary, but he never left. And tensions, according to insiders, never stopped rising. The mysterious security lapse. Here's where things get even stranger. The Reiner estate was equipped with top-tier security. Cameras, motion sensors, private patrols. Yet none of it seemed to stop what happened that night. In fact, according to a leaked preliminary report from an LAPD investigator, several cameras mysteriously lost power between 9:55 p.m. and 11:10 p.m., the estimated time of death. No blackouts, no storms, just system failure. One technician said the power box looked tampered with. Another claimed it may have been an internal override. So, who had access to the system? Only 3 people: Rob, Michelle, and Nick. The neighbors heard a scream. One detail not reported in most outlets. A neighbor, just 2 doors down, told investigators she heard a woman scream shortly after 10 p.m. It was quick. One sharp scream. Not drawn out. Just raw. Like she saw something she couldn't believe. But here's the catch. That neighbor, an older woman in her 70s, called the Brentwood Patrol Hotline, not 911. Her report was logged at 10:11 p.m. By the time police were called by Nick, or whoever used Nick's phone, it was nearly 10:40 p.m. Almost a 30-minute gap. So what happened in that window? Was there hesitation? A cleanup? A panic attack? Or a cover-up? The unfinished meal. One photo in the evidence file shows something gut-wrenchingly human. Rob and Michelle's dinner. 2 plates. Half-eaten salmon. A glass of red wine. The food hadn't even gone cold when they were attacked. There was no sign of struggle at the table. No broken glass. No kicked-over chairs. Which tells us one thing. The attack didn't happen in a fight. It happened in an ambush. The killer didn't force entry. They were invited in. And that changes everything. The third presence theory. Some experts believe Nick didn't act alone. They point to the surveillance failure. The 30-minute gap. The blood patterns. The missing journal. Yes, missing. Because Rob's infamous leather journal, his personal thoughts, rants, and reflections, is nowhere to be found. And the safe? Still locked. No forced entry. No sign of it being cracked. But guess what? One of Rob's closest friends told an investigator off the record. Rob always left his safe open when he was home. He said it was for convenience. So why was it locked after the murders? And who had time to lock it? Unless they weren't in a rush. Unless they felt safe. The Brentwood break-in, 12 hours later. Now we circle back to the break-in. 3:42 a.m. A figure approaches the back gate. They don't scale it. They slip through a gap in the hedges. They're dressed in dark clothes. They carry something. Maybe a bag, maybe tools. They head straight for the guest house. Not the main house. The guest house. The same place where Nick had lived. Where he had stayed silent. Where he allegedly wrote down thoughts during his isolation. But just as the intruder neared the patio door, they froze. A security light kicked on, thanks to a newly repaired motion sensor. The figure ran. They were gone in seconds. No prints. No clear footage. Just a shadow. But the motive? Clear as day. Someone believes there's something still hidden in that guest house. A document. A photo. A video. Something worth risking everything for. Final revelation. The burned folder. And now, one more detail. The most chilling of all. In the guest house fireplace, investigators found charred remains of what appeared to be a manila folder. Inside, fragments of printed paper. One scrap had legible text. Just 4 words. Meg knows the truth. And with that, we have our cliffhanger. Because if Meg knows the truth, what exactly has she been keeping from the world? And why is everyone so desperate to silence her? Who is Nick Reiner? Not the media headline. Not the mugshot. Not the boy in cuffs dragged out of the Reiner estate. But the real Nick. The ghost who lived in the guest house. The lost son of a Hollywood king. The man who may now carry the blood of his parents on his hands, or the weight of someone else's cover-up. Let's rewind. Before the Brentwood bloodbath. Before Meg's cryptic Instagram post. Before the security footage vanished. Let's go back to the root of the family and the rupture. A prince born to a king. Nick Reiner entered the world with more privilege than 99.9% of humanity. His father, Rob Reiner, a director, actor, activist, and Hollywood icon. His grandfather, Carl Reiner, legendary comedian and Mel Brooks' creative partner. His mother, Michelle Singer Reiner, a thoughtful philanthropist, described as the soul of the family. Nick was born into royalty, not of monarchy, but of media. Movie sets were his playgrounds. Award shows were family dinners. He didn't dream of fame. He inherited it. But something about Nick never fit the mold. Early warning signs. By age 11, Nick was expelled from his elite private school for what sources described as severe behavioral issues. By 13, he'd already tried marijuana. By 14, cocaine. And by 15, he was checked into his first rehab facility in Utah. That's right, 15. His life wasn't just spiraling. It was crashing. But here's the twist most don't know. Nick didn't just struggle, he wrote about it. In 2015, he co-wrote a semi-autobiographical film with his father called Being Charlie. It told the story of a young man bouncing from rehab to rehab, desperate to escape the long shadow of his famous father. It was raw, honest, painful, and in hindsight, prophetic. Rob and Nick, a complicated love story. Rob loved Nick. That's not up for debate. But love isn't always enough, especially when guilt poisons it. Rob reportedly said in an old interview, "There were times I was more focused on directing than fathering, and that guilt never left." He tried to make amends, funded Nick's projects, brought him onto film sets, even co-wrote scripts with him. But insiders say Rob was walking on eggshells for years, trying to keep Nick balanced, trying to keep everything from cracking. One family friend said, Rob was torn between the world's expectations of him and his own son's disappointment. The guest house years. When Nick moved back into the guest house during the pandemic, it was supposed to be a healing period. No pressure, no deadlines, just recovery. But something shifted. He rarely left the property. He stopped posting on social media. He refused meetings with producers. He became a ghost in his own life. Neighbors reported seeing him pace late at night in the yard. Others said he stared for hours out the guest house window, toward the main house. Some nights, shouting could be heard. Rob's voice, Nick's voice, Michelle's tears. But nothing ever escalated until December 15th. Or so we thought. The last argument. According to a source close to the Reiners' housekeeper, there was a fight the week before the murders. It wasn't a typical argument. It was nuclear. The housekeeper says she overheard the words, "I'm not your burden anymore." And then a chilling scream, "Get out of my house." But here's the strange part. That same night, Rob reportedly ordered new locks for the guest house door. He was preparing for something. The locks were scheduled to be installed on December 16th. One day too late. Meg Ryan's role in Nick's life. Here's where things get murky and uncomfortable. Sources claim Meg Ryan had a strained relationship with Nick Reiner. Why? Because she was too close to Rob. She allegedly tried to step in during Nick's third rehab stint, suggesting a different facility, even writing a check for part of the cost. Nick took it as betrayal. To him, Meg was a surrogate sibling, or worse, a threat. Someone trying to fix him while stealing his father's time and love. An anonymous former assistant said, Nick hated when Meg came over. He'd leave the house completely. Said she was fake. Was it jealousy? Was it something deeper? Because when Meg's post made no mention of Nick, not even a line of empathy for him, it wasn't an oversight. It was a message. Nick's obsession with the story. In a chilling diary excerpt from 2021, leaked by someone close to the Reiner family, Nick wrote, "They've already written the ending. I'm the monster. I'm the addict. I'm the disappointment. All that's left is the final scene." That line is haunting, especially now, because it suggests premeditation, or prophecy, or a warning no one took seriously. Nick had become convinced that his life was narrative, that his family wasn't real, but scripted, that everyone around him was playing a role. And maybe, just maybe, he decided to rewrite the ending. Mental illness or calculated rage. Nick's defense attorney has floated the mental illness theory. They claim he was not mentally competent at the time of the murders. But others aren't so sure. His digital footprint, scrubbed mostly clean, shows searches that imply premeditation. How long do stab wounds take to kill? Where is the jugular vein? Ways to make a murder look like self-defense. That's not a breakdown. That's a blueprint. Unless someone else made those searches on his devices. The LAPD hasn't confirmed whose fingerprints were found on the laptop recovered from the guest house. But sources say there's more than one set. The guest house journal. Back to the guest house. Investigators found a burnt manila folder in the fireplace. But they also found fragments of a second journal, not Rob's. Nick's. One page survived. It read, "They never wanted me. They wanted the image of me. The story. I'm done being the ghost in their mansion. Time to wake the house." Chilling. Almost poetic. Almost scripted. But one line, scrawled on the side, in the margin, barely legible, said, "If Meg opens her mouth, they'll all know." Know what exactly? What is Meg sitting on? A secret? A promise? Or a guilt she's never shared? A sister's warning? A curveball? Nick has a half-sister from Rob's previous marriage, named Tracy. Tracy Reiner. Actress. Producer. Private. She hasn't spoken publicly since the murders. But a journalist claims she sent a private message to a friend shortly after Nick's arrest. One line stood out. He was never the villain. But he learned how to play one. Especially when Dad stopped directing. What does that mean? Did Nick perform the role of unhinged son for so long that he became it? Or was he being directed? Right until the end? The Meg connection deepens. Here's the final twist. A neighbor's security camera caught something disturbing 2 days before the murders. A figure, blonde, hat pulled low, walking into the side gate of the Reiner estate. The time? 11:22 p.m. She was there for over an hour. The figure left the same way she came in. The footage is grainy, but one investigator privately confirmed. We believe it was Meg Ryan. She hasn't acknowledged this visit. She never mentioned it in her post. And the timing? Too coincidental. If she saw Nick, if they spoke, if she left without alerting Rob or Michelle, that changes everything. Final note, the name on the wall. Before police left the Reiner home that night, one detective noticed something odd scratched into the underside of the guest house desk drawer. A name, etched crudely, repeated 3 times. Meg, Meg, Meg. That's not grief. That's not guilt. That's fixation. Cliffhanger ending to Chapter 2. Because if Nick Reiner was obsessed with Meg Ryan, and if he believed she was part of the story written against him, then what happened on December 15th might not have been revenge on his parents. It might have been a message meant for her. It wasn't just murder. It wasn't just tragedy. It felt personal, and not just to the family, to her. Because as evidence continues to unravel, as interviews leak and investigators dig, one name keeps circling back. Not Nick, not Rob, not even Michelle, but Meg. Meg Ryan, the woman at the center of Rob Reiner's cinematic masterpiece, When Harry Met Sally. But was she just the actress he once directed? Or was she something far more complicated? A confidant, a witness, maybe even a keeper of secrets. To understand what this all means, to grasp the layers behind her haunting Instagram post, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to when they first met. Back to when Harry met Sally, and when Rob met Meg. The audition that changed everything. The year was 1988. Hollywood was at its peak. Big hair, bigger egos, and even bigger films. Rob Reiner, already acclaimed for Stand By Me and The Princess Bride, was developing a romantic comedy that would become legend. He wanted it to be honest, raw, unfiltered. He wanted it to reflect his own heartbreak after divorcing Penny Marshall. And he needed a Sally. Hundreds of actresses were considered. Dozens auditioned. None felt right. Until Meg walked in. Unknown. Soft-spoken. A spark behind the smile. Within 10 minutes, Rob reportedly told producers, "That's her. That's Sally. And I don't care what anyone says." It wasn't just casting. It was chemistry. And not just with Billy Crystal. Though that on-screen magic was undeniable, Meg and Rob had an instant, almost eerie connection. Like they'd known each other in another life. On set, a director and his muse. Filming When Harry Met Sally wasn't easy. There were rewrites, delays, studio notes. But one thing never wavered. Rob's faith in Meg. She was young. This was her breakout. And he guided her, not like a puppet master, but like a dance partner. They rehearsed lines together at night. Discussed character arcs over dinner. Reworked scenes on the fly, whispering ideas like co-authors. Crew members described their bond as electric. Billy Crystal once joked, "I had to compete for Meg's attention with the director." But it wasn't romantic. It was intimate in a different way. Rob understood Meg. He saw the emotional wells she pulled from. And she trusted him more than anyone in the business. In one behind-the-scenes interview, Meg said, "Rob gave me wings. He didn't just direct. He believed." After the movie, a lifelong friendship. When Harry Met Sally became an instant classic. Critical acclaim. Box office smash. Award buzz. But the real story? What happened after? Rob and Meg remained close, long after the film wrapped. They were seen dining in New York, walking in Malibu, even vacationing with their respective families. And here's what's interesting. Even as Meg's career skyrocketed, with Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, and beyond, she still turned to Rob. She didn't just admire him. She leaned on him. And Rob? He treated Meg like family. He once said in a Vanity Fair profile, "Meg's not a friend. She's a part of my DNA." Let that sink in. Part of my DNA. This wasn't industry flattery. This was deeper. And when you view her silence following his murder through that lens, it becomes haunting. Meg the confidant. Over the years, Rob reportedly told Meg things he didn't share with anyone else. About Nick. About guilt. About fear. During a panel in 2010, Meg let something slip. "You know, Rob once said he wasn't sure he was a great father, but he knew how to create great characters." It sounded like a compliment, but insiders say it came from a conversation where Rob confessed real doubt. He felt he'd missed something with Nick, that he'd been absent in all the ways that mattered. And Meg? She didn't just listen. She carried that weight. Maybe too much of it. Rob's letters to Meg. Here's where the story turns almost cinematic. A source close to Meg claims Rob sent her handwritten letters over the years. Not emails. Not texts. Letters. Dozens of them. He called them notes to Sally. Half character study. Half emotional confessional. Meg reportedly kept every one in a box labeled letters from Rob. But after the murders, that box disappeared from her home. When asked, Meg allegedly told a friend, "I moved them. Somewhere safe. Somewhere safe? Or somewhere unreachable." And what's in those letters? Could they contain truths about Rob's state of mind? His relationship with Nick? Something darker? And if Meg's protecting those letters, who is she protecting them from? The interview that never aired. In 2024, Meg and Rob sat for a joint interview, scheduled to air on a streaming platform. It was supposed to be a reflection, a look back on when Harry met Sally's legacy. But according to the production crew, things got weird. Off camera, Rob grew emotional, agitated. He mentioned unfinished business, talked about a reckoning, said something about wills and letters left behind. The interview was cut short. It never aired. And when asked why, the network cited creative differences. But a leaked production note simply read, "Rob got too personal. Something was off." Was this a warning? A farewell? Or an attempt to say something before it was too late? The midnight visit. We have to return to that surveillance footage. A woman, blonde, concealed, entered the Reiner estate 2 nights before the murders. Stayed for an hour. Left unseen. The LAPD hasn't confirmed Meg's identity. But privately, one officer said, "We're not ruling anyone out, even visitors." What would Meg have been doing there, late at night? Was she checking on Rob? Delivering something? Or was it a goodbye? She hasn't commented. Hasn't acknowledged it. Hasn't even hinted at it. Which, in this case, says everything. When the world fell silent, she broke first. Hollywood was stunned by the murders. The silence was deafening. Billy Crystal didn't speak. No big directors issued tributes. The Academy made a short post. But Meg? She was the first to say something truly emotional. Her post wasn't corporate. It was human. She wrote of love, fairy tales, hope, but not justice, not heartbreak, not even grief. She ended her message with this: "I don't know what comes next." But they'd wanted to be hopeful. Not they, Rob and Michelle. A subtle reminder. She's not mourning a legend. She's mourning family. And whatever she's not saying might be tearing her apart. Whispers of a promise. This part hasn't been verified. But if true, it changes everything. An industry veteran claims Meg once told them, "If anything ever happens to Rob, I have to do something. He made me promise." Promise what? To tell a story? To reveal a truth? To protect Nick? Or to bury something the world was never meant to know? Because silence can be a shield, but it can also be a weapon. And right now, Meg Ryan is holding it like a sword. Because if Rob Reiner trusted Meg Ryan with a truth he couldn't share in life, then what happens next may depend on whether she's ready to share it in death. Everyone is talking about Rob. The tributes, the tears, the legacy, and of course, Nick. The headlines scream his name in bold red letters. The suspected killer. The troubled son. The air-turned monster. But lost in all the noise? Michelle Singer Reiner. The woman lying just down the hallway from Rob. Bleeding. Alone. Silent. The woman no one seems to talk about. And yet, she may be the one who saw it all coming. The woman beside the man. To the public, Michelle was Rob Reiner's wife. A side note. A support beam. A background presence. But those who really knew her, they'll tell you this. She was the heart, not just of her marriage, but of the whole Reiner family. She was the reason Rob kept going during his darkest years. She was the one who pulled Nick out of hospital beds, who sat through the screaming fits, the late-night calls, the court dates, the relapses. She was the one behind the foundation work, the quiet donor, the passionate activist, the mental health warrior. But like most women in Hollywood shadows, she rarely took credit. And now, she's rarely being mentioned. Why? Because Michelle may have been the one person who knew all the pieces and was ready to say something. A love story almost no one talks about. Michelle met Rob in the late 1980s. Not on a set, not through studio execs, but at a charity fundraiser for children's mental health. He was already famous. She wasn't starstruck. They talked for hours, not about movies, but about purpose. That night, he told a friend. She doesn't care about who I am. She sees who I'm not. They married quietly. No press frenzy. No Hollywood spectacle. Just love. Real. Grounded. Stable. And for years, Michelle was the one who held the chaos back from creeping in. She loved Nick fiercely, but she worried about him deeply. And in her final months, that worry turned into something heavier. Something closer to fear. The therapist's call. Here's something the media hasn't covered. According to an anonymous source close to the family's longtime therapist, Michelle made a call in October, 2 months before the murders. She sounded anxious. Whispering, she allegedly said, "I think he's watching us. I don't sleep through the night anymore." When asked who he was, she paused. Then, "Nick. He's not Nick anymore." That phrase sent a chill through the room. And according to the same source, Michelle requested a private session. But she never showed up. A secret bank account. In early December, just 2 weeks before her death, Michelle made a large wire transfer, over $75,000. From her private savings to a separate account under a new name, M.S. Lowell. That account was opened in a different state, under an alias. Why? Where was she going? Was she planning to leave? One theory is that she was preparing to separate from Rob, not out of anger, but survival. Another theory? She wasn't leaving Rob. She was planning to take Nick away, into treatment, permanently, and maybe he found out. A final visit with a friend. 2 days before the murders, Michelle visited an old friend, someone not from Hollywood, but from her college years. She stayed for tea. They talked for hours. And at one point, she said this, "I don't know what's going to happen, but I've written it all down. If anything happens to me, it's in the drawer." The friend thought she was being dramatic. Now, she's terrified, because detectives searched that friend's home last week. And in the drawer, they found a manila envelope. Inside, letters, notes, photos, and a flash drive. The contents haven't been released to the public, but the LAPD is treating it as potential evidence. The photos that don't make sense. There's one photo from the crime scene the press hasn't published. It was taken inside Michelle's walk-in closet. Taped to the inside of the door were 3 Polaroids. Each one showed Nick, smiling. But here's the strange part. Each photo had a word written on it in Michelle's handwriting. Before, during, now. No one knows what it means. Was she documenting a change? Was it a warning? Or was she watching the evolution of her own son into something she no longer recognized? Meg Ryan's bond with Michelle. Meg and Michelle were not close friends, but they respected each other. Sources say they often exchanged warm words at industry events. But one source, an assistant to Rob, claims Michelle once said, "Meg means well, but she doesn't know what Nick's capable of." That's a loaded sentence. And it adds a whole new dimension to Meg's Instagram tribute. Because now we have to ask, did Meg know about Michelle's concerns? Did Michelle confide in her? Or worse, did Meg dismiss those fears? The phone call that changed everything. On the night of the murder, at 8:31 p.m., Michelle made a phone call. Not to a friend, not to family, but to a former attorney. The call lasted 4 minutes. She left no voicemail. The attorney later told police. She sounded scared, but she didn't explain. She just said, "Do I have the right to remove someone from my house without their consent if they're a family member?" That was 2 hours before she died. And no one knows what happened between that call and the screams the neighbors later heard. Why the press is avoiding her story. Here's something the public hasn't noticed. Every major outlet is focusing on Rob and Nick. Michelle's name is barely mentioned. Why? Because Michelle's story makes people uncomfortable. She doesn't fit into the neat Hollywood narrative. She wasn't famous. She wasn't messy. She was the quiet backbone of a family that's now been obliterated. Her death makes this story more than just a father-son tragedy. It makes it a complete collapse. And maybe the industry doesn't know how to process that. Or maybe someone doesn't want her story told. The unfinished email. Investigators found Michelle's laptop open on her desk. An email draft was left unsent. It read, "I think I need to disappear for a while. I know you won't understand, but I don't want to be here when it happens." When he finally snaps, I've seen it in his eyes. This isn't the son I raised. It's something else. She never pressed send. But it's the clearest warning we have. She knew. She saw it coming. And yet she stayed. For Rob? For love? For hope? Maybe all three. The will that was about to change. This has not been confirmed publicly, but according to someone close to the Reiner legal team, Michelle and Rob were in the process of revising their will. The reason? They allegedly planned to disinherit Nick. The new documents were nearly finalized. They just hadn't been signed. And guess what day they were scheduled to meet with the estate lawyer? December 16th, the day after the murders. Coincidence? Or motive? She wasn't just a victim, she was a key. Michelle wasn't collateral damage. She wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was the only person who knew all the threads. The emotional ones. The financial ones. The legal ones. She knew Rob's doubts. She knew Nick's decline. And maybe, just maybe, she knew what Meg was keeping quiet. But now, she can't speak. Only her notes, her photos, her letters, and her final actions will tell the truth. Because the flash drive found in her drawer is now in LAPD custody. And according to one investigator, what's on it could rewrite everything we think we know about that night and the people involved. Sometimes, the most important part of a murder investigation isn't what's found. It's what's missing. Not the body, not the suspect, not even the motive, but the minutes, the time that vanishes in the chaos, the silence between the scream and the sirens. And in the Reiner case, we're talking about exactly 24 minutes. Let's set the clock. 10:11 p.m. A neighbor reports hearing a woman scream. Sharp, sudden, like she'd seen a ghost. 10:35 p.m. Nick Reiner's phone dials 911. The caller sounds frantic, disconnected, can't speak in full sentences. The call cuts off. 10:42 p.m. Police arrive at the Reiner estate. The gap? 24 unaccounted minutes. And forensics say the murders occurred within that window. But the evidence? The blood? The way Rob and Michelle were found? It tells a story that's far from straightforward. Let's talk about the knife. There was only one knife found at the scene. A 10-inch chef's knife. High carbon steel. Expensive. Professional grade. Found on the floor of the master bathroom, near Michelle's body. Covered in blood. No fingerprints. Not even Nick's. Wiped clean. Gloves? Maybe. But here's where it gets weirder. The blade had two types of blood, Rob's and Michelle's, but in different patterns. Experts say Rob's blood was consistent with stabbing wounds. Michelle's? More like splash. Almost as if she wasn't stabbed with that knife. Almost as if there was another weapon used on her that was never found. Wounds that don't match. Let's go deeper. Rob had 5 stab wounds. Chest, shoulder, side, stomach, and 1 through the palm, likely from defense. Clean, straight, sharp, precise. Michelle? 3 lacerations. 1 defensive cut, but 1, a deep gash along her scalp, was not from a knife. Forensics say it was likely caused by a blunt object. A lamp? A vase? A heavy book? None were found damaged. So what caused it? What happened in that room? And why would someone switch weapons halfway through a murder? Unless they weren't expecting her to fight back. Unless she walked in after Rob was already dead and tried to stop something too late. The missing blood trail. Here's something odd. There was very little blood outside the master bedroom and hallway. No blood in the guest house. No blood in the kitchen. Not even a bloody footprint. How? In most domestic stabbings, the killer leaves a trail. But this scene? It was surgically clean. Too clean. Investigators believe someone wiped the floor, quickly and only in certain spots. Which raises a terrifying question. Who cleans up a crime scene before calling 911? Nick? Someone else? Or were the missing minutes used for something else entirely? The house was still warm. One first responder noted that when they entered the home, the thermostat was set to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, unusual for a Southern California night. They described the air as humid, almost stifling. Why does that matter? Because heat can affect time of death estimations. If the thermostat had been turned up after the murders, it could throw off forensic readings, confuse decay timelines, delay clotting, mask rigor mortis stages. And who would do that? Only someone who knew how investigations worked, or someone told what to do. The bathroom delay theory. Now here's a theory gaining traction. Investigators believe Michelle may have fled to the bathroom, locking herself in temporarily. There were nail marks on the inside of the door, tiny flakes of chipped polish. Her DNA, and the lock, broken, as if someone kicked it in. There's even a boot print on the lower panel. But the boot doesn't match Nick's shoes. That's critical. Nick was found barefoot in the guest house. So if that boot print isn't his, Whose is it? And where is that person now? Surveillance blackout. Let's revisit the cameras. There were 7 security cameras on the Reiner property. 2 at the front gate. 2 facing the driveway. 1 facing the side yard. 1 above the pool. 1 in the kitchen hallway. All 7 went dark at 9:56 p.m. Not cut. Not smashed. Just disabled. Digitally. The system log shows a shutdown command entered from the central control panel, which was located in the main house office. And only 2 people had the passcode. Rob and Michelle, unless someone else had learned it, or had been given it, by someone who trusted them, or someone who manipulated them. The Alexa that heard too much. This next detail hasn't been reported by any media outlet yet. An Amazon Alexa device in the guest house was still live, and because of an error in the privacy settings, it was recording passively, even when not prompted. It caught 3 audio clips. All are timestamped between 10:14 p.m. and 10:27 p.m., the missing minutes. Here's what they contain. Clip 1, 10:14 p.m. Male voice, panicked, whispering. They weren't supposed to be home yet. I didn't mean this. Clip 2, 10:19 p.m. Same voice, louder. Where's the phone? I need to call. I need to fix this. What do I do? Clip 3, 10:27 p.m. Unidentified second voice, possibly female, but muffled. Don't. We talked about this. Clean up. Get rid of the. And then silence. If Nick was alone, who was he talking to? If he wasn't alone, why hasn't the LAPD mentioned a second person? Unless they're hiding that detail. Or waiting to confirm it. The text message that vanished. Michelle's phone is missing. It wasn't found near her body. It wasn't in the bed. Not on her nightstand. Not in her purse. Gone. But here's the kicker. Her provider shows a text message sent at 10:03 p.m. to a saved contact labeled M. Just one word. Help. Nothing else. No follow-up. And the number? It's untraceable. Prepaid burner phone. Last active that night. Never again since. Who's M? Meg? A friend? A fixer? And what were they supposed to do? The staged scene? Some forensics experts now believe the crime scene was partially staged. Too clean. Too structured. Too deliberate. Rob's body was positioned in the center of the bedroom floor, arms out, like a cross. A symbol? A message? Michelle's was near the shower, knees tucked under her, almost as if someone moved her after death. And the blood? It pooled, but not where you'd expect it to, based on natural flow. It was contained, guided, like someone had time. And intention. The deleted footage theory. There's one last thing. The home security system had a backup hard drive. Encrypted, cloud-connected, set to upload every night at 2 a.m. But on December 15th, the backup was manually deleted at 10:48 p.m., just 6 minutes after the 911 call, from Rob's office computer. And guess who that computer was last logged into by? Reiner. Unless someone else used his profile, or forced him to, or framed him. The missing 24 minutes. Those 24 minutes, between scream and siren, contain the heart of this case. Because within that space, Rob Reiner was murdered. Michelle was silenced. Surveillance was disabled. A crime scene was cleaned. Evidence was destroyed. A second voice was heard. A device was wiped. A text was sent to someone we can't trace. And the only man alive who might explain it is sitting in a cell, saying nothing. Because buried in that 24-minute blackout is one moment, one decision, that could crack this case wide open. And someone else knows exactly what it is. It was never meant to be read. It wasn't a screenplay. It wasn't an outline. And it definitely wasn't a memoir. It was private, raw, painfully honest. And now, it might just be the key to understanding why Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer were murdered. We're talking about Rob Reiner's personal diary. The one no one was supposed to find. The one Rob kept hidden in plain sight. Under lock and key. Out of view, but never far from him. Until it vanished. Until it was found. Or something like it. The journal Rob never spoke about. Rob Reiner was a writer by nature. Words were his tools. Dialogue was his weapon. Storytelling was his oxygen. But in the final years of his life, something changed. Friends say he became more withdrawn. Less focused on film. More focused on reflection. A friend, a producer who worked with Rob on A Few Good Men, shared this off record. Rob said he started writing again, but not for the screen. He said he had to get things out of his head before they swallowed him. That's how the diary started. Not as a project, as a purge. The red leather book. It wasn't a pile of pages. It wasn't typed. It wasn't scattered. It was all contained in a red leather-bound journal. No title. No name. Just worn corners and a faint embossed R. Rob was seen carrying it to coffee shops, to therapy, even to set meetings. But no one was ever allowed to open it. Not even Michelle. Not even Nick. Especially not Nick. One assistant once asked what he was writing. Rob smiled and said, "The version of the truth I can't say out loud." The diary disappears. After Rob and Michelle's bodies were discovered, detectives cataloged the contents of their home. Jewelry, electronics, notebooks. But the red leather diary? Nowhere. It wasn't in Rob's office. Not in his bedside drawer. Not in the safe. Gone. At first, police assumed it was lost in the chaos. But after Meg Ryan's tribute went viral, and after whispers of her promise to Rob began surfacing, LAPD started to reconsider. Was the diary hidden? Or was it taken? And if so, by whom? Meg Ryan's secret delivery. Here's where the story takes a wild turn. 2 days after Rob's murder, a courier delivered a small package to a private post office in Topanga Canyon. The recipient? A storage locker registered under an alias tied to a now-defunct LLC, once linked to Meg Ryan's business manager. Security footage shows a woman, face covered, sliding the package into the drop box. The shape? Book-sized. The handwriting? Unconfirmed. But analysts say it resembles Meg's style. So, was it the diary? And if so, why hide it? Why not turn it over to police? Unless it held something that would shake everything apart. Pages that shouldn't exist. Now let's fast forward. An anonymous envelope arrived at a journalist's desk in Los Angeles, 8 days after the murders. No return address. No fingerprints. No letter. Just 5 torn-out diary pages. Pages that match the description of Rob's journal. And what's on them is explosive. Page 1. I don't know who my son is anymore. I've tried. For 32 years, I've tried. But I look at Nick and I see something foreign now. Not my son. Not my blood. Just rage. Something is broken, and I don't know how to fix it anymore. I love him. God help me, I love him. But I don't trust him. This alone was enough to stop readers cold. But it gets darker. Page 2. The night he screamed at Michelle. She touched his arm. Just touched it. He flinched. Then exploded. Yelled that we were watching him. That we were using him. That Meg was in on it too. Meg. Why her? Why does he see betrayal in everyone who's tried to help? This matches a report from the housekeeper of a violent altercation weeks before the murders. Page 3. The document I shouldn't have signed. He convinced us to co-sign that document. $140,000. Rehab again. But this time, it didn't feel like recovery. It felt like manipulation. He was calm. Too calm. I think he's planning something. Was this the motive? A financial betrayal? Or something deeper? An emotional breaking point? Page 4. Meg deserves to know. She's always seen through him. Maybe that's why he resents her. Or fears her. I told her once, if something happens to me, find the red book. She promised she would. This is the first concrete link between the diary and Meg Ryan. It also suggests Rob was preparing for something to happen. A threat. A loss. A breakdown. Or a murder. Page 5. They'll make it look like an accident. If you're reading this, it means it wasn't an accident. It means someone wanted me silenced. Don't believe the first story. Don't believe the second either. Keep digging. Let that sink in. Rob wasn't just journaling. He was documenting danger. This wasn't confession. It was a breadcrumb trail. Why the diary matters. This changes everything. Because now we know. Rob feared his son. He suspected manipulation. He involved Meg Ryan as a potential keeper of the truth. And he predicted something bad was coming. So where's the rest of the diary? Still hidden? Destroyed? Or waiting for the right moment to surface? Because sources say the LAPD has recovered 3 additional pages, sent anonymously. And the writing is even more disturbing. One line reads, "There's more than one person involved. I just don't know who's pulling the strings. Is this a conspiracy or a cover-up?" The diary introduces a new theory. This wasn't just a murder driven by mental illness or a domestic dispute. It might have been part of a larger scheme. One involving money, secrets, jealousy, legacy, and maybe even a long-standing grudge. Against Rob. Against the family. Against Meg, who would want Rob silenced. What truth was he protecting? And why did Nick, of all people, erupt now. Unless he didn't act alone. Or worse, he didn't act at all. Meg's next move. If Meg Ryan really has the diary, or parts of it, the next chapter may depend on her. Will she release it? Will she hand it to investigators? Or will she protect Rob's secrets forever? A source close to her says she's torn. She wants justice. But she also doesn't want to be the one who detonates a bomb that could destroy what's left of Rob's legacy. But here's the hard truth. If she waits too long, someone else might get to it first. Someone who'll twist it, spin it, weaponize it. Because information like this, it's power. And Hollywood feeds on power. Because one more page